Welcome to another episode of Courageous Me. And today we've got the gorgeous Terri Batsakis. And do you know what's really cool? A couple of weeks ago, I went to one of Dale Mont's road shows that he does, and it was called Reimagine Business. It was all about AI. And I'm a front seat hanger, so I beeline for the front row. When I get to the front, there's this woman who's about to sit down at the front row. So I just walked up to her and said, "Excuse me, can I please sit next to you?" And she's like, "Yeah, of course." Anyway, this is her. We got chatting. Obviously, we stayed for the full day for this amazing workshop roadshow. But we got talking, and during our conversations, I got to learn some really interesting things about this amazing woman who is a health coach. And I said, "I've got to get you on the podcast so that you can share some of your story." It's super cool. So, Terri, on that note, what excites you about having a conversation with me today about courage?
Firstly, thank you so much for inviting me onto your podcast. It's very, very exciting to be here. What excites me, I think the biggest thing is the fact that what I've done for the last 14, 15 years is help women unleash the best version of themselves. And when you spoke to me about Courageous Me, I just kind of went, yeah, that's the next stage of helping women kind of unleash who they are inside. We've all got that person inside, but society, life, experience, everything just kind of stifles us, I guess. It kind of crushes us a little bit throughout life until we kind of start crawling out. Sometimes we get squashed again and come back out. So, yeah, here I am. That's why.
That is so cool. And that is something we are going to explore in a lot more detail. So, on that note, and being a woman who is, really taking advantage of living a full life and doing things that light you up, and I know that because we've had a conversation. Tell me about a time in your life, I don't care how far back you want to go, when you first realized that what you did or what you were doing at the time really did take courage.
Well, I'm going to go way back. I'm nearly 51, so about that many years. Um, everything about me has been a challenge, to say the least. I am that person that everyone goes, "Wow, is your life ever not a melodrama?" And I'm like, yeah, nah. So right from the day I was born, we had melodrama where there was complications and da da da. So I was actually not ever meant to be around. I was, in fact, um, the last of 5 children that came 10 years late. So that was kind of like a miracle in itself. But clearly I was always meant to be here because I had a lot of challenges. And I think that's why I am the person I am today. So I have a mentality that, I'm a victim of abuse, amongst many other things. And you can either play the victim, even if, say, you are a victim, you can either play the victim or make the decision not to be. And from day one, I've always made the decision not to be the victim. So I grew up in a household with an alcoholic father who was quite abusive and so forth. He passed away a year and a half ago, but we made peace at this point. So at the time, growing up in this household, there was a lot of abuse. Mum was hurt, my siblings were hurt. My siblings all left home. By the time I was 11, I was the only person at home. So it was just my parents and I. So it was a case of survival of the fittest. It was either, become this victim that I was and just succumb to it, or rise above it and draw strength from it, and which is what I did. So even though my dad was abusive, I learned a lot about how to be strong and independent and courageous to survive that entire process. So that was
At
probably
11,
the first, yeah, yeah.
how,
So that
how did,
was,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but how did you at 11 have this kind of awareness that you could play the victim or not? Like, that's so young.
I grew up in a neighborhood that was pretty dodgy, like the Bronx type place here in Melbourne. So it's pretty dodgy. So I saw a lot of stuff. A couple of houses away from us, we had a brothel, like that sort of thing. Like it was, pretty dodgy. So I saw a lot of things. I saw a lot of drug abuse and the effects it had on people. I witnessed people overdose. I saw others being abused. I saw a lot of bullying. I was a victim of bullying as well. There was a lot of that sort of stuff going on. So it was a real case of, well, either I can become like that or I'm getting out of the hood. Like, it was that mentality. You see movies about it, right? Well, I kind of lived it. So it was at that point that I was like, no, I really need to get out of here. And my parents they spent a lot of time going to our holiday house. And so I would be left at home on my own a fair bit to fend for myself for days on end, sometimes weeks. And it was a case of, do I sit at home by myself and be scared, or do I just be the tough kid from the hood? And so I've always had this mentality, fake it till you make it. So yeah, that's where I was at.
Wow. So you were the tough kid from the hood.
Well, I played the tough kid from
You played
the
Okay. This is really interesting. You played the tough kid, but you weren't the tough kid.
No, God,
what
no.
was going on inside you? So on the outside, if someone else saw you, they would have gone, she's the tough kid, she's a survivor, blah, blah.
Yeah.
But what was going on inside Terri at the
Far
time?
from it. I was not the survivor. I did play the tough kid. Everyone was like, well, I was minuscule. I was very, very tiny. I've always been a very tiny person. I was born tiny. I was really little kid. I was the smallest in the class at school, all that sort of thing. And so I was picked on quite a lot because of my size. So it's like the Jack Russell that's really little but barks a lot. I was that. So I was the yapper. But inside, let me tell you, I was packing my dacks hardcore. I was withering. I was petrified. I was the one who had the doona over my head, the pillow over, every little sound. It was quite bad. I was diagnosed with depression at 13. I've got clinical depression, so it was something that I battled quite hard. I attempted suicide a few times through my teens. So I had a lot of turmoil that was going on, and it's something that I've battled forever. One of the things with depression is once you've got it, it's not kind of one of those things that magically goes away. You can go through years of amazingness, but it kind of sits in the background. And in case I wasn't battling that enough, I also had anorexia as a teenager. So for me, anorexia was about control. It was the only thing that I could control, what I do or don't eat. It was a really big thing for me. And exercise was another thing that was really big for me. So I started training from quite young. And a lot of the times people think that anorexia is about body dysmorphia. And I know for me and many others who have gone through that road that I've spoken with, it had nothing to do with body dysmorphia. It had everything to do with control. And that's where it was kind of like I was the kid that was, strong and courageous and on the outside, but inside I was dying, like hardcore.
Oh my God. But do you know what's so fascinating is knowing the kind of work you do now and what you said earlier when I was doing the introduction. I now see why you did that or why you're doing this kind of work. Like, it makes complete sense. So you're this kid, you've got all of these things going on and tough stuff, right? This is not stuff. Some of us never go through anything like you've just shared. And this is all in your first 20 years of life. You didn't obviously succeed in taking your own life because you're here. Yeah, thank God.
Thank God for my mum, actually.
Okay, so talk to us about over that period, why are you still here? Like, what got you through? What was it? Was it other people that helped? Tell me about that, because this is big.
Why am I still here? Probably divine intervention. Huge believer in that, 100%. My mum.
What do you mean by divine intervention? Tell me what that looks like or looked like.
There were occasions where I was literally pushing boundaries and life was on the line and so forth. And I was alone, which meant that I could have succeeded quite well. And somehow or other, my mum would come home when she wasn't supposed to be coming home and catch me right on time. And it happened every single time. So her and Dad were away at our holiday house and, oh yeah, we'll see you next week. Sure. Great opportunity. And then all of a sudden, oh, what are you doing home? Like, when I say my mum and Dad would come home. Both of them would come home. And yet it was my mum who would come in and she would find me and then jump into action. So, and it was like, what, like how? This was the perfect scenario. So how? Divine intervention. Like it
Okay,
has to
that
be.
makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. So when you said divine intervention and your mum, it's the two of those together, just the timing.
Yeah.
You were meant to be here. Yeah, absolutely. So how did you go at school? Like what was school like for you? It wouldn't have been what a normal school life would be, right?
It looked pretty normal. It looked pretty normal because, like I said, I was that tough exterior. You know, you've got to put on that tough face, that show. My parents were all about, as most parents, I guess, from the area, were all about appearance, making sure that, you know, nobody knows what goes on in your house. It's, you know, it's your business. It's nobody else's business, all that sort of thing. So, yeah, I was bullied at school, and I was bullied because I was small. I was bullied because I was smart, and I had a lot of challenges. Now, it's funny, just another side of the whole courageous thing. I was very smart, as in I used to get really great grades and so forth, and I was always the kid that sat at the front, funny enough.
That's why we know each other.
Nothing's changed.
Once the hangers.
So I didn't know until I was in my 40s that I actually have dyslexia. But I didn't know this at school because I was a straight A student. And I didn't know why at the time everyone else would breeze through everything, and I had to like really read. I read every book twice in order to understand things, and I would reread. One page took me 10 reads before I could move to the next, and I didn't understand why. I had no idea at the time. So it wasn't until I was 40 that I realized that. So that side of things was a real challenge, is, you know, trying to keep up this reputation that I'd created for myself, God knows how, that I was a straight A student, which I was. And the only thing that I would ever get on my reports was, you know, Terri's a very conscientious student, very smart, blah, 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 but she talks to everybody. I know that's hard to believe, right?
Well, I'm glad you do, because like I said, that's how we know each other. But isn't that interesting, and probably a good thing that you didn't know, because you could never label yourself then?
No, that's exactly
dyslexic.
right.
Yeah,
and I think
whereas
that's huge, actually. Well, you've hit the nail on the head there. The moment you stick a label on something, I kind of
Yep.
feel that it constricts you,
Yep.
whereas not knowing meant that I just battled on. And one of the things that I really struggled with was maths, because I was really good at maths, like really good at maths, but I had no idea how to explain it to you. So you could give me the most complex calculus question and I'd go, that's the answer, because it would work out in my head in its jumbled back to front upside down way of thinking. But when the teacher said, oh, but you're going to lose points because there's no working out, I'd be like, well, I don't know how to work it out. It's just, that's the answer. Is it right? Yes, but you need to show you're working out. Why? You just need the answer.
no, you need to show the working out. Isn't that interesting? Oh, I'm so glad that you didn't find out though. Like that is so good. But you had to put in more effort.
Yeah.
As you said, relative to say what you saw other kids that are at the same level, what effort they were putting in. But you still did it. You're battling all these big life challenges and you're putting in this effort. Why did you put in the effort to maintain the identity of a straight A student? What was it about that?
I think it was a couple of things. It boiled down to the control. It was something I could control. That was a big one. My dad had told me that I would never amount to anything, that I was a loser. So I was like, I'll show you, buddy. I love when people challenge me and go, you can't do it, because I go, sure I can. I'll show you. And so that was great. So a lot of kids would have, you know, been like, you know, you get told you're bad often enough, you start to believe it. I was the kid that was like, no, I know opposite. So it was something that drove me. But I guess the other thing was that when he was home and being abusive, it was really easy to escape that because I was studying. So I used my studies as my safeguard as well. So I guess it was kind of a few things.
Oh, which would make sense, because then you probably had more time, because it took you longer to learn things or to absorb whatever it was you were doing, reading or maths or whatever. Yeah. But you had that time, that outlet was your safe place to do that.
Correct.
Okay, interesting. So did you finish year 12?
I did.
Oh, wow. And what did you do after that?
Then I went on to uni and did a Bachelor of Arts and Diploma of Education to qualify as a teacher. Funny enough, as an English teacher. So I've majored in philosophy.
But again, you didn't know you had dyslexia, which was a good thing.
No, I had no idea. And when I actually got into uni, my dad challenged me about that.
Why?
And,
How did he challenge you?
Oh, nobody else in the family has gone to uni. What makes you so special? And, what are you going to do with it? You're just going to get married and have kids. That sort of fun encouragement.
And again, you defied it and said, no, I am going to uni.
Yeah. I'm going to fast forward because my dad sounds like an absolute beast. And
No.
I'm going to actually just fast forward for a sec because he did sound like a big beast. And let me tell you, he was, right? So for most of my life, I had this serious hate against my dad. But it wasn't until the last few years when he was on his deathbed, basically, that he actually told me he was proud of me. And he actually confessed to me that he said, you function like I function, and the more someone puts you down, the harder you fight. He said, and that was one of the reasons why I did challenge you. So I'm just going to put that in there because he does sound like a monster, and he was a monster. It was horrible growing up with him. But when I heard that, I was kind of like, wow, okay. Interesting way to get your kid to do anything, but okay, it worked. So,
and how did hearing that, because I know that there are other kids where this is the same thing, where the dad pushes them or the mum, but they push them because they believe in their mind that that's the way of actually helping them build their resilience, toughen them up. How did hearing those words come out of his mouth at, only a few years ago, how did that make you feel?
I have a way of thinking that if I can understand something, I can accept something and find peace with it. I don't condone the way that he went about it, and I don't agree with it. And I certainly wouldn't do that to anybody on a deliberate level because it's really risky. You could go either way, right? But I did understand it. Knowing how he grew up, he had quite a tough upbringing, I guess, which is why he was the person that he was. And when I can understand something, I can accept it and find peace with it. So that's when I then not only made peace with my background and my history and my upbringing, but I made peace with him. So after hating him for 47, 48 years that I did, I was then able to go, okay, cool. You can now pass. And I know that I'm not ever going to look back. Not that I'm not going to look negatively because there are still negative things there, but I will look back with understanding.
Yeah. Do you know, I was listening to a podcast episode recently and I wasn't prepared to say this, so I can't remember who it was, and it was amazing. So whoever it was, I'm giving you credit. They were talking about a frame of reference, and actually it was Mel Robbins, and I can't remember who she was talking to, but this person, the guest, was talking about a frame of reference and that everybody grows up and behaves from their own frame of reference. And when you can understand that context that they grew up in, which is why they're like they are, rightly or wrongly, it kind of frees you and it helps you understand their behavior. This is exactly what you're talking about here.
Hold on. That's exactly
right. And that's exactly why knowing this freed you then. And doesn't mean you condone the behavior or anything like that, but it was that freeing. Is that what you said has happened?
It is spot on. It was in a situation where I was like, okay, so it wasn't that I was a bad person. It was your interpretation of how you needed to raise me. So that was, let's face it, as a parent, we don't get manuals on how to be parents. And some people do an okay job, some people do a terrible job, and some people do a brilliant job, and everyone else is somewhere in between. So
totally. But you understanding that meant you realized this wasn't about you. This wasn't that you were a bad person. This was just the only way he knew to raise you and almost in a strange way love you. Because that behavior of his is what he thought, because he worked that way, was going to actually work better for you and get you to where you got. The beautiful story in this is that you got to hear those words coming out of his mouth before he did pass away, which
Yes,
not everybody
100%.
gets to do.
Very grateful for that. Absolutely. Because that's exactly right. A lot of people don't ever find that peace. And
No.
yeah, I was very grateful for the fact that I had that opportunity. Absolutely.
Yeah. So you're very self-aware, right? Really, really self-aware. Where's that come from?
A lot of personal development.
Okay. Kind of figured it must have been. However,
Yeah.
when did that start? Why and when?
I studied philosophy at university, and I studied moral and ethics. So that was a big one. That's kind of started my journey of looking at both sides of things, and there's always three sides to stories: mine, yours, and the truth. So it's the case in absolutely everything. I had to do research papers on things like abortion and capital punishment and euthanasia. So just the little topics, right? And it doesn't matter how black or white you are. When you research something to that degree, you go, wow, there is so much grey in there. It's like, ugh, it depends. So whenever anybody asks me any question in life, I go, it depends. So that's, I guess, where it really stemmed from. It opened up my eyes to why I was the way that I was, with the depression, with the anorexia, with like all of that stuff. And it made me want to understand myself more. Now, throw in there the fact that I've had 35 plus years of counselling as a result of my mental health. That in conjunction with like initially studying philosophy and then going on, I have read, I couldn't tell you how many personal development books, attended seminars, done workshops, so on and so forth. Studied wellness coaching. So there's a lot of work that's gone into being who I am today, because like I said, I was never going to be the victim, ever.
I love that though. You didn't just know that, you actually went out of your way to make sure of it. Yeah,
I heard a profound statement or saying when I was at uni, and it kind of has stuck with me forever. And they were talking about twin brothers, and one was an alcoholic, and he was homeless and lived on the street, obviously not homeless. And then the other one was this multi-billionaire who was ultra successful and so on and so forth. And they were being interviewed by the same journalist. And the journalist asked the homeless one, why is your life like this? And he said, because my dad was a drunk and he beat me. And then they asked the twin brother, and the twin brother said, because my dad was a drunk and he beat me. And because my dad was a drunk and he beat me, I could really, really relate to this interview and this story. And I was like, well, I've got a choice here. I can be the drunk that's homeless and the victim, or I can go, nah, man, I'm doing everything else. So
I love that story. And actually, I use that a lot too in my work and my life. And it is so beautiful. The difference is, though, you really were the product of this, like not even metaphorically, like
correct.
literally. And you made a choice. You could have gone either way, but you made a choice to go the way you went. And is this all that kind of led you in? Like, how did you then become a health coach?
I had a lot of health challenges,
Okay.
which you could imagine having been anorexic and depressed. So there's a lot of health challenges that came about. So I was a very heavy smoker. Very, very
What
heavy.
age did you start?
13.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay. I kind of figured that. Yeah. Okay.
I was one of the early kids. And so by the time I became an adult, I was smoking 2 packets of Peter Stuyvesant 20s a day.
Oh, wow.
Like
Okay.
that. It was just not I worked 4 jobs to support myself.
And pay for your cigarettes.
and exactly right. So my mentality was, well, I work for it, so I can, I can buy whatever I want with my money because I'm working for it. So anyway, so I sat off as a smoker. So throw smoking in there, anorexia, all that sort of challenge. Fast forward through meeting my husband, who is pretty magical, but yeah, he's just a whole different conversation. Anyway, so I met my husband, and it took us a while to fall pregnant with my daughter, who turns out was a miracle because I should never have been able to fall pregnant. So anyway,
How old were you?
I was 28 when I had her, so 27.
Okay. Yep. Beautiful. Just give me some context.
Yeah. So by this point, so up until that point, the challenges that I had were all my mental health. So at this point, things hadn't really gone over the top. So I'm just going to backtrack slightly. I was born with a prolapse disc, and as it turns out, spina bifida, but I didn't find that out till I was in my 40s either. So I did have spinal issues, when I was a kid. So I was in and out of chiros, and I went through what's called distraction. So where they lay you in bed in the hospital for a fortnight, and they put weights on the end of your feet to stretch out your spine and all that sort of stuff. So my dad had it done because of his back issues, and then they were like, "Oh, that's a good idea. Let's try that on Terri." So,
but they didn't diagnose it as spina bifida at this point.
No, that was for the prolapse disc.
Oh, right. Okay.
At that point, whether they had found spina bifida or not, I had no idea about it. So nobody had actually pointed that out. I was in my 40s before I found that out.
Wow.
Yeah, 40s were a huge realization.
Yeah. It sounds like your 40s have been big.
Yeah. So anyway, so I did have spinal issues. So anyway, so then I fell pregnant to my daughter by some miracle. And then I went through a very traumatic birth, 48 hours, emergency cesarean. We both nearly died. I hemorrhaged while in recovery. Okay, cool. Baby's good. I'm home. I'm recovering from a horrible cesarean, and postnatal depression kicks in. Battling through that side of things, I start getting pain in my neck. I start complaining. So this is pretty much the next day after giving birth to my daughter. And I kept saying to the nurses, I've got like this lump on my neck, and, it hurts a lot. It really hurts a lot. Anyway, as it turns out, I found out 4 years later, through MRIs and I ended up having a prolapse disc in my neck. So I needed to have surgery because the disc that was prolapsed in my neck was affecting my right arm. I had no feeling whatsoever. I actually took an oven pan. I took a pan out of the oven with no oven mitts, put it on the sink, and had blisters on my hand. I was like, that should have hurt.
And it didn't hurt?
I felt nothing.
And so this is because of the prolapse disc in your neck?
So then I went to the doctor and I was like, kind of something's NQR here.
Yeah.
And that's when you kind of went, okay, well, you got to go to an orthopedic specialist. So off I went. The orthopedic specialist was like, yeah, whatever, tell me a story. Like, really blasé. Sends me for an MRI, come back, and he said, oh, Mrs. Batsakis, come on in, take a seat. This is serious. I was like, boy, you've changed your tune, right? And then he starts talking. And the next thing I hear was, any questions? And I was like, what did you say after this is serious? So I missed it all. So off he went again, telling me again. So he said to me, oh, we've found that you have in fact got a prolapse disc. He goes, but it's not just prolapse. There's something else going on in there. He goes, that we need to get in and operate on. He goes, I can't actually tell unless I'm in there exactly what it is. There's too much inflammation and fluid and so forth. He goes, but I don't actually know how you're still walking because the simplest sneeze could have sent you in quadriplegia. And I was like, what are you talking about? He goes, and when you leave my office today, you have to go down the road to prosthetics and get yourself a neck brace. And I was like, what? And meanwhile, we're in the midst of moving house and, it was just like chaos. And my daughter was 4. And I was like, what are you talking about? Anyway, I'm really cutting a long story short here. And then so off I went to have spinal fusion, puts me in under surgery and whatnot, comes out afterwards. And the nurse comes up to me and says, oh, so this is before I even saw my surgeon at all. The nurse comes up and she goes, oh, your anaesthetist accidentally pricked himself with your syringe. Can you please sign an authorization so we can just check your blood that there's no contagious things that, he's at risk? Sure. She passes me a pen and I'm like, I can't do this. So I can't actually grab the pen.
You can't grasp it. Yeah, for those who can't see, she's trying to put her fingers together and it's not working. Well, in the example.
Yeah. So I was trying to grasp the pen, but my fingers were not actually closing to grasp the pen. And I was like, what's going on? She's like, I'm just going to call the doctor. I was like, okay. So off she trotted. He comes back and he's like, so just to fill you in on what's happened, he said we found the prolapse disc. We've removed it and put a prosthetic. So they took a bone graft out of my hip to put in as a prosthetic disc and screwed up a plate in there and all beautiful. He said, however, in the process, we also found that 2 portions of the vertebrae, so the little end bits that sit on the vertebrae, had broken off and embedded in my spinal cord and were apparently severing my cord, like cutting into the cord. And I was like, what? He's like, and this is why you had extensive nerve pain, because I was constantly in and out of hospital with nerve pain and numbness and tingling. My arm would go blue. It was just like weird and wonderful things. Yeah, it was just not fun. And I was like, what are you talking about? And he's like, and it looks like you have some damage in your arm at the moment that we need to work through. He said, so tomorrow we're going to get you up to try and start getting you moving, and we'll start some rehab with your hand. And I was like, okay. And he left. And the nurse came back with, okay, but you still need to sign this paper. So I clasped
I can't hold the pen.
So I've clasped the hand with my palms, and so I've signed the document with my palms and then laid there and cried like, this is supposed to fix me, and now I don't even know whether we're moving. What's going on? So, and then he was trying to, he also did a test, so before he walked away, with my feet, kind of, do you feel this? Can you feel this? Can you wiggle your toes? So I could wiggle my toes, but I couldn't feel anything. And he's like, okay, we've got some work to do. So next morning, he comes and he said, I just want to assess exactly where you're at. I'm going to help you up with the physio. So the physio is with him. We're going to help you up together. We're going to put you in this frame. So this frame was kind of chest height. And, let's go walking. And I was like, okay. So they've helped me up. So standing up was not an issue. But then it was a case, cool, let's go for a walk. And the legs wouldn't function. I was like, what are you talking about? This, like, come on, brain, come on, legs. We're like, so in my head, I'm like, come on, right?
You know what to do.
I'm like, take that step. So anyway, 10 minutes later, I burst into tears, sat back down. I was like, what's going on with my leg? So anyway, it took me 5 days. He was not going to let me out of hospital until I had done a full lap of the ward. And in the meantime, I was also having physio treatment and an OT trying to get some strength into my hand. So doing lots of like just clenching and opening, closing of my fingers to try and get anything done. So I finally did walk around the ward. On the 4th day, I did it with a frame. On the 5th day, I did it no frame. So
again, there was a challenge.
Yeah, I was
you were
I'm
up
walking, buddy. I'm just like, we're doing this. So yeah, off I trotted home. Actually, I kind of missed a few things in between having my daughter and this surgery. Post my daughter, I'm just going to backtrack and then come back to the spinal situation. So backtrack. A year after my daughter was born, they found that I had a tumor the size of a tennis ball on my right ovary. So I had to. It was just a real fluke. That I was so grateful for private health insurance and my sister who kind of stepped up and helped me out because she jumped in to look after my daughter whilst I had to go into surgery. So within 5 days, I'd seen the GP, I'd had an ultrasound, I got the results, I booked in with the gynecologist, he had an assessment and we operated. So that all happened in 5 days, right? So it was just like divine intervention again. And my mum was overseas and so was my mother-in-law. So I had nobody to look after my daughter and we were we owned a cafe at the time that we had just opened up. So my husband was working there full time. So I was like, what am I supposed to do with my baby? So I rang, my sister rang me to find out how I went at the gyno. And I was like, this and this. And he's got an appointment tomorrow that he can operate, but I can't, what am I going to do with Denise? She said to me, hang up and I'll call you back. I went, okay. So she's hung up. She calls back 2 minutes later and she's like, okay, cool. I've got 2 weeks off. I've just taken annual leave. I'm going to help you. So I was like, thank you. Lifesaver. I know.
Yeah.
So forever grateful. I can't even tell you how grateful I am to my sister for that particular moment. So I had surgery on that, and my gyno goes to me, so once I've come out and so forth, and he said to me, I'll be honest with you, he said, had you waited another 48 hours, you probably wouldn't be here because it erupted in surgery. And I was like, rightio. So at the start of this interview, when I said to you, I was kind of always meant to be here, I am.
Oh, and you know what? I know I got to know you a little bit briefly at that event, but I didn't know any of this. This is all new to me too. I'm learning about Terri as we're going right now.
Yeah, there's a few things going on. So
Oh, fruit. Okay, keep going. This is just, I'm mind blown, by the way, right now.
So a year later, I then found out that I had endometriosis and polycystic ovaries. I also had abnormal cancer cells on my cervix. So anyway, in and out of laser treatment, checkup, just all fun and games. I'm going to bore you with details because it's very extensive, but it was that side of things. Fast forwarding back now to my surgery, because they were challenging enough, especially having pain in the neck, nerve pain in and out of hospital for that. So then I've had this surgery and I've come home. It's like, well, I can't do anything because I still don't have function of my right arm. So by this point, I could clench my hand, but I couldn't do anything else with it. So my husband came to the rescue. He was the one who washed my hair, helped me with personal care. He was the one who would chop up my steak and carry my cup and, just run the house, basically.
Beautiful.
It was crazy. And at the time, I was a handmade jewelry maker. So it impacted my job and my business, my partnership with my business partner. It was just kind of, and we were just opening up a business, like an actual storefront, because even way back then, we were actually online. So we're talking 2005 now. So we were running an online business. And in 2006, February 2006, we were opening up a storefront. And it was like, well, we've got to get all this stuff done. And here I am.
What sort of
I can't use
business?
my hand. It was handmade jewelry.
Okay.
So I would literally have to use pliers to wire and turn and whatever. And all of a sudden, I can't use my hand. So it was a lot of physio, a lot of, da-da-da-da-da. Huge celebration when I carried my own coffee cup from the kitchen sink to the lounge. Yay, party! So then that December, so July I'd had the surgery, and that December I was like, cool, I'm doing a fun run. So I did I did a fun run around the tan raising money for breast cancer. So I was like, okay, we're like one step ahead of everything now. Like we're on track here. This is all good. So we continued on life, merry, etc. Had a couple of laparoscopies with this endometriosis, trying to clear things out, removing cysts, just fun little micro surgeries along the way. Then what came next? Yes, my son. And we made the decision that we wanted to have another baby, and that wasn't going to happen naturally. We had tried and tried and tried, and by this point, it had been, Denise was 6. So it was like, okay, well, what next? So I made the decision, my husband and I, made the decision, okay, let's go down the path of IVF. Man, that was an experience in itself. So we went down the path of IVF. By, again, some miracle, we had my son. When we are actually talking to the specialist at the IVF Centre, Melbourne IVF, we did all the tests between myself and my husband, and, there was all these other issues going on from both of us. And he said, I have to be honest with you, you've got less than 2% chance of conception. And I was like, really? And I was so excited.
Because it was 2%.
It's amazing. And he's like, did you hear what I said to you? It's 2%. And I said, yeah, it's not 0. And he's like, wow. He goes, I've never actually heard anyone respond like that. He goes, that's amazing. He goes, because I was expecting the complete opposite reaction. And I said to him, no, it only takes one little sperm, yeah? That's it. And like, we can do this. And my husband's looking at me like, ugh, here we go again. So I was like, are you in? He's like, of course. Okay, cool. Let's do it. So we were like, all right, go for it. And so we did. And in our second, we were very, very, very blessed. In our second attempt, we got pregnant with PJ, who is the most out there kid. He was meant to be on this earth. Both of my kids were. And like if you get to ever meet my kids, they were meant to be here too.
Just like you were, though. You were meant to be here, so
100%.
no surprises
Oh,
there.
Yeah. I was definitely. Oh, yeah. I was. One thing I didn't tell you was my dad kept calling me. So my whole life, all I ever heard was, you weren't meant to be here. You were the hole in the condom. And I was like, wow, that's so cool.
Saying that makes me feel so wanted. Mind you, thank God for that hole.
Yeah, right.
Because
So
it
I
meant
was
you're
meant
here.
to be here. Exactly. So anyway, so then we had my son, and I'd always trained. So this is where, ever since I was about 12, 13, I've always trained, and I always ate rubbish, let me tell you. And I had no idea about health food and so forth. Through this, I had my own journey of weight in between here. So we've covered anorexia. And then, I was a pretty small adult until I had my daughter, and I put on 44 kilos with my daughter. So I ended up obese, so right on the opposite end of the spectrum. It was just crazy. I know. I was like, I don't do things by halves, right?
No.
One extreme to another. And because I'd had all these health issues, I said to my husband, I've spent most of my life like trying to kill myself. And now I realize I actually want to be here because like these two kids really need me. You need me. I want to be here. So I need to do something like to like learn how to help myself basically. And he's like, I don't know. He goes, speak to Rocky. So Rocky was my coach at the time who used to teach my boot camp classes. So
health coach,
he was
PT.
a PT, right?
Yeah, personal trainer.
So I used to do boot camp with this guy, and he was in uni. He was a young guy, like he was way younger than me, right? Like 15 years younger than me or whatever. And I'm like, he's this little pipsqueak that's so awesome. Like I absolutely adore this guy. And to this day, I'm still in contact with him, by the way. So, hi, Rocky. So I was telling him, and he goes, why don't you become a PT? And I was like, what? He said, why don't you become a PT? And I'm like, what are you talking about? All I've ever done is corporate, because I never ended up teaching. I hated the whole politics of it. Once I did all my teaching rounds and everything else, I ended up working in the public service for a few years and then moved into insurance. So I worked in work cover for 13 years. And so here we are with Rocky saying, become a PT. And I was like, Anyway, I spoke with my husband about it. He's like, go for it. Why not? And I went, okay, I'm going to do it so that I can help myself.
And you've exercised the whole time through. You mentioned that in the beginning of the conversation.
Yep.
Yeah.
So even at my
exercise and you were good friends.
Yeah. Even at my biggest, exercise was not an issue for me. I've always trained.
Yep. You might have eaten badly. You might have been a heavy smoker. You might have had all these other things going on. But you always, exercise is not, for some people that never spend any of their life doing it, you've always done it.
I've always done the exercise.
Got it.
I quit smoking when I found out I was pregnant to my daughter, and I've never touched it since.
Okay.
So that went, but the rubbish eating was still there. So, okay, decision was made. Cool, let's become a PT. So I studied that part-time whilst still working. So I was working in corporate, in insurance, part-time, and also running my jewelry business. So I still had that. So I've always had business on the side. So I studied. So now I was studying, running a business, and working in insurance, just doing a couple of things and raising two kids. With a daughter.
And all the other things that have been going on health-wise. Yes, absolutely.
And with a daughter who was a competitive dancer. So it was just kind of like, ugh. Anyway.
The mum's taxi.
Yes. So ladies out there listening to this, let me tell you, you can wear 25 hats. You just got to be really good at organising your schedule. Routine is the best. Right? Yeah. So anyway, so then I started to become a PT, and from there I started doing one course after another about health and nutrition and so forth. So I studied nutrition. I then eventually ended up doing mindset coaching and so forth. So I've spent the last 15 years, I've always been studying, and I'm studying at the moment again, right? So
what are you studying?
At the moment, I'm getting my certification as a menopause coaching specialist. Yes.
Beautiful. Yay. Talk about that one soon.
So, yes, I've always studied. It's always been something that I've loved. Just focused on the health side of things, mental health as well as physical health. So nutrition and exercise. So I did a little bit of everything. Like I really just focused on lots of areas. And then I took it one step further because of all my own injuries and did a movement restoration course. So learning about helping people in movement recovery after injury and functional movement and that side of things. So I can work with allied health professionals and help mobilize clients and strengthen them and so on and so forth. So that was how I became a PT. So then in 2014, a coach that I was working with at the time was like, you'd make a really good bodybuilding competitor. And I was like, get out of here, like whatever. And, when someone plants a seed and you're like, really? Like I've learned to walk, I've learned to use how to use my arm again. Let's see about this bodybuilding business, right?
It is so funny because I'm just hearing you. So when someone's telling you can't do something, you're like, hell, as soon as you've said that, I'm like, I know where this is going. Someone said she could do something. It's like, let me show you how.
I was like, yeah, maybe I will do this. So I started coaching under somebody to compete in bodybuilding. And I did. So I did the novice competitions and walked out with a couple of golds and a silver, which I was really stoked with.
In bodybuilding.
So but at this point, I'm 40, right? So
right.
I was like, I'm 40 and I'm standing here in this bikini and I didn't do fitness or bikini status, which are the easier things I could have done. When I say easier, they're not easy. When I say easier, as in you don't have to work so hard at building muscularity, right? No, I went for figure, which means you have to actually grow muscle. Now, as a woman, we can't physiologically grow muscle as easily as men, right? So it was like, ugh, and I am what's called an ectomorph. So I'm the physique that is that finds it much harder to build muscularity than, say, there's somatic types, 3 different somatic types. So how well your muscles adapt and grow versus not. So think, for example, without going into it in too much detail, think of a person who's a marathon runner. So that's my natural physique versus, say, an Olympic lifter, right? So I needed to have muscularity of an Olympic lifter, but my skeletal system is the marathon runner. So I was like, sure, let's go figure and the figure competition and make it even harder for ourselves. So I did really well with that. In between there, I was also doing grading for kickboxing. So I got my kids and my husband and I were all into martial arts. So I was going for my level 10, which is pro level grading for kickboxing. So I competed and won at bodybuilding. And then a week later, I did my grading and became a pro level kickboxer. Now, remember, I've got a plate in my neck, right? So I could not take punches because that's not safe. So I was the little Jack Russell in amongst the big boys that would run in and run out before they punch you. I scored lots of kicks in my body, but I was never hit in the head.
Because you couldn't be, right? Because you've got this disc in your neck. Of course. So to protect it,
I just made sure I got out of there.
Go, Jack Russell.
Get out of there, man. So anyway, I did this competition more than anything else to prove to my clients, you can do anything you want to, right? Just do it. So fast forward, that was 2014. 2015, I get nominated for the Fitness Australia Active Achiever Awards. So Fitness Australia is now known as AusActive, and they still have these awards. That was the first year they were running them, and they've continued since. So I get nominated for this award, and I was like, what have I done I help people. I've done some pretty amazing things for their life, but I don't know if I deserve this award. Well, I kind of won it, so it was a bit cool.
I kind of won it.
Yay for Victoria.
To Terri. Holy mackerel.
Yeah, I was pretty stoked about that. And one of the beautiful things about that was I had the opportunity all the awards and everything were up in Queensland. So I got to go to some prestigious studios and have a look at the way that they've set up their gyms and so forth. Because up until this point, I was running my business out of school halls. So I was running all my group fitness classes through school halls, and I had hired space in a gym so that I could do the PTs at the gym, and my nutrition coaching was done at home. So I was running like 3 aspects to this business. So I've come home from this award and said to my husband, I think it's time we get our own studio. And he was like, okay, if that's what you want to do, babe, because that's how my husband rolls. So he was like, let's make it happen. And the place where I was renting space from, I had stood in front of that. It was a big roller door. I had stood in front of one of my friends who was also a client and said, I would love this place. The things I could do with this place. And she's like, God bless that one day you can get it. Well, I went to the agent so that I could start looking for space. And he said, actually, I've got something that's vacant that you might like. So he sends me the address and I was like, you have got to be kidding. And I rock up and it's this place. And I was like, I will take it because it was in my budget. It was just so I opened up my own studio.
But I'm not surprised here again, divine intervention. You've looked at this place, you've stood outside and said, this is the place I want. And
yeah, I'm a huge believer in manifestation. Huge.
Oh, yeah. I kind of gathered that.
Ask and thou shalt receive.
Yeah.
Right?
Just never what you ask for.
Huge.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a word of advice that I always say to people is never, ever, if you're going through a rough patch, never, ever go, oh my God, what else? Don't be daft.
Because they will give you something else.
Yes. Do not open up that challenge. So I opened up the studio, had an amazing team, ran that for 8 years. It was, phenomenal. Huge, like just an incredible journey through that, which I made the decision last August that I was closing. I was like, I'm done. The business was Terrific Fitness. It had run for 13 years, hugely successful. There's not a person in the neighborhood that doesn't know who I am or hasn't heard of the business. It was just massive. But it was not the model I wanted anymore. I didn't even know by this point where I wanted to actually be in the industry anymore. I started going through the menopause transition, just it was all over the place. Hence the then career change.
Did you know, I was just with someone before now and talking about when my career change happened. And she said, was there a moment? I said, there wasn't a moment, but all started around the time, which I didn't know at the time. I was actually going through perimenopause. Didn't know it, but so when you say that, it's because I was about to say, why did you leave a really successful business that's doing so well? I get it. I totally get it.
Yeah, perimenopause.
Yeah, I get it.
It was an absolute. I actually, so in 2018, I was competing again in bodybuilding. So this time I wasn't competing in the novice. I was competing in like the full shebang. So I did the state championships, the national championships, and the world championships, and walked away with quite a few gold medals and silver medals and all the rest. But in the middle of the competition prep, we were in a car accident and we got rear-ended and I damaged my neck again. And so it prolapsed the disc above and below. Anyway, they can't do anything about that now. So now it's a case of, be careful because you could end up in a wheelchair. And I spent every day since in pain. So I live with chronic pain. There are times when I'm totally incapacitated and there are other times when I'm fully functioning like today. So it just depends on how I am on the day. Now, I did have to change around how I ran my business, Terrific Fitness, because I physically couldn't be teaching 13 classes and 20 PTs a week. It was just not possible anymore physically for me. So the way that I exercised, the way that I ran my business, the way that I functioned, everything changed. So my mental health plummeted. My husband was going through an autoimmune disease. So he'd gotten really sick and then he got diagnosed with an autoimmune disease and that was a challenge. So we were both a mess. And in amongst all this, I then start going through perimenopause and that menopause transition. So my mental health was like just terrible.
I hear you.
And like many women that I've spoken with since,
Mm-hmm.
got offered antidepressants. And for the record, I can't take antidepressants because the one and only time I ever tried, I started convulsing. And they were like, that's not for you, love. So that was not an option for me. So through this journey, I tried lots of natural remedies because I'm the person who always tries all the natural stuff first. So where I was the most unhealthy person, I've gone the complete opposite now. So it's always about, okay, how do I do it with food? How do I do it with training? How do I do, so all of these things. So through my own journey, I did a lot of research. I did a lot of studies and spoke to a lot of experts in the field in various professions. So naturopaths, Chinese medicine, herbalists, acupuncturists, chiros, physios, osteos, you name it, I've spoken with them. And in the end, it was like, nah, I got nothing. Like nothing is improving. I actually said to my husband, I'd rather be dead than live the way that I'm living right now. He's like, yeah, it's time for us to take next level. I went, yeah, I agree. So I found a GP because most GPs have no idea about menopause. So my GP was like, oh, I've got to refer you on. I was like, yeah, cool. I didn't want to go to a gyno because I know that, again, you have to find a specific gyno for menopause. So I was like, I can't afford to be jumping from one person to another. So I did a Google search and found a GP local that actually specializes in women's health, particularly menopause. So I was like, okay, let's start there. That will be the cheaper and easier, more convenient option. If that fails too, okay, cool, we go gyno way. So I spoke with her. She was absolutely incredible. And one of the best things was that she was prepared to listen. And it wasn't just a case of, it's all in your head, which a lot of us women hear, because menopause is not just about hot flushes and sweats, which is what most people think. There's so many more things than that. So at this point, I've closed Terrific Fitness. I was exploring, what am I doing with my life? Do I even want to be a coach? I tried getting back into teaching. I was like, I'm not loving it. Oh my God, I'm so lost. For the first time in my life, I had no idea. But one thing I did have was my faith. I'm a very faithful person in my religion. And so I was like, God will send me wherever I need to be. He will send me. And so I saw my doctor, and she was like, okay, so what paths have you tried and what sort of things would you be open to exploring? And I was like, well, I've pretty much tried everything unless you can think of anything else natural. So I, went through everything that I had tried. And I said, the only other thing I guess is hormone therapy, which is not something I wanted to do, but I was like, okay, run me through the risks. So she was like, okay, we've got to look at what your history is, your family history. I went through like a really extensive evaluation because hormone therapy is not applicable to everybody. And there's so many different things. So it's a really individual thing. So all I say to my women is, if that's something you want to explore, you need to speak to the right person to see, is it the right thing for you? So it's not always going to be the right thing for the person. So we found the right combination for me after some trial and error. And I found that if I didn't do all the other stuff that I knew, like the food and, the lifestyle stuff, the sleep and all the other stuff that I coach on, if I didn't do that, even with the hormone therapy, I felt like rubbish. Whereas if I do all the other lifestyle stuff that I teach, then the hormone therapy works for me. And I was like, interesting. So that's where I was like, okay, this is my thing. So I started talking about this whole journey with a few of my ex-clients. And they're like, if you get into coaching, I'm in, because that's where I'm at. Come on, you got to do this. And so that's how Freedom Fitness for Women was born. And that's what I'm doing now.
And it makes so much sense because you and I had this very brief moment where I said, because I've been very close to a woman called Grace Malloy, who has started a business here in Australia called Menopause Friendly Australia off the back of their UK business. It's the whole thing's going global, and just being part of that team and learning more about menopause, reflecting on my own journey, which, oh my goodness, it was for years and years and years unresolved and undiagnosed, and a lot of unnecessary discomfort and frustration and all of that. So I completely changed my world, and now on HRT, and just couldn't live without it. But I so understand why this has happened to you. But as you say, it's not just the hormone therapy in isolation. It's everything else that you're doing and that you have done. And I'm not surprised that you're a health coach. Like you say, both physical health, mental health, all of that, with everything you've been through, your own personal experience, but all the research that goes into, okay, this is what's out there, but this is what's working for me. That's not working, that's not working, that's not working. But if I do a bit of this or a bit of that, I totally get now why you're doing the work you're doing and why you've ended up exactly where you are, why you gave up that business. Oh my goodness. Like,
and my thing was in
wow.
the business, I couldn't get up close and personal with my clients the way that I wanted to. I was busy running the business. I was running staff. We had group fitness going. It's a big studio. It was a massive studio. So, there's classes going on and PTs going on and nutrition's going on and I was like, I was a little bit of something to everybody and nothing major to everybody. We've coached over 10,000 people in the 14 years that I've been a PT. So I've seen and spoken to so many women, and we've done, and men, but predominantly women. My business was always, even though it was for both genders, or all genders, I should say, previously, it was 80% women. And so I was like, that was what I predominantly worked with. So not only have I got the research, the studies, what I've, read and heard and watched and, all the rest of it, I've got clinical studies. So I know what works and what doesn't by actually working with people. I have over 10,000 people that I've worked with over the years. So I know what works and what doesn't. And when someone says to me, what about this? I go, it depends, right? Like, good old depends. There's no black or white. Let's do some research. So before I give anyone any advice, even now in this business, I do a massive evaluation on people. I do biofeedback, lifestyle feedback. I do structural balance. I do posture analysis. I do mindset analysis. So I've got a 16-page document that I'm like firing questions at to get full medical history, full everything, speak with their allied health professionals and medical practitioners if need be. I have those conversations so that I can make sure when I'm helping a woman now, I'm helping her holistically. This is not just, okay, cool, let's do 5-star jump. No, this is like, half of my girls, I'm just like, don't even worry about the exercise right now. Let's just focus on this. We'll get there. So, yeah.
Oh, Terri, it's I don't even need to ask the question I was going to end with was, what's the next thing you've got to reach in and find some courage to do?
I'm doing it.
Yeah, exactly. I reckon this is it, right? Well, actually, I reckon everything in your life. I mean, talk about a life absolutely from the beginning, like from inception, literally, where courage has played a role. You are the epitome of that. Like,
thank you.
But yeah,
I do believe that I was put on this earth because I serve a purpose.
Yeah.
And I really feel like I'm living that purpose now. And there's a reason, Kim, why you and I met. And I don't think it's going to stop here with us. So it's simple as that. We've got so much more to talk about.
Oh my gosh, so much more. Obviously, we can't do it right now on the podcast.
Correct.
And it was so funny because there was 500 people in the room that day.
Right.
You and I beeline for the front. And I think there were all other men in the front row, just you and I. And we just sat next to each other and got talking. And, oh, wow. And I didn't know, like I said, I didn't know a lot of what you've shared today.
Yeah.
But you are one incredible, incredible human being. Your story is just mind-blowing. Like, my mind is literally blown about not only just everything you've been through, but your outlook on life, Terri, is so beautiful. And I remember when I sat next to you, I felt this real positive energy, but a real safeness too. Like, I almost felt like I had this kindred soul next to me, and I just met you going through this experience in this workshop, which was about AI. So nothing to do with all of this stuff that we've just talked about today. Totally different. But anyone who wants to find out a bit more about the work that you're doing now, obviously I'll put the details in the show notes, but just first thing, where will I send them? How will they get to know a bit more about you and find out
They
more?
can follow me on Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, and Google. Just Google Freedom Fitness for Women and they'll find me online. So
Freedom Fitness for Women.
Freedom Fitness for Women. If they search that on any of the socials or on Google, they'll find me.
Wow. And wow. You are one courageous woman, Terri. Thank you for sharing your story. I know there will be people listening that will go, thank you, Terri. You are an inspiration and you've encouraged me to maybe go and do something or make a change or even just find out more information about something that you've touched on today. So
thank you. And thank you very much for having me on your show. Thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.